Let me give you 5 things you should not do if you're visiting Nairobi. And I can tell you this because I've been living here myself for the last 2 years after I moved here from Germany, and I've been since then diving quite a lot into the culture, from learning Swahili, different activities here in the city, going to all the restaurants, and exploring the city business-wise as well. So this is exactly why I want to share with you 5 essential things in this video that make your trip smoother, easier, and safer. The first thing I would like to talk about is don't ignore the safety precautions. Even if I see Nairobi as a quite safe place, and especially much safer than many Western cities, especially in the US or in some other European countries, there are still things you should not do. For instance, there's no reason for you to wear very expensive jewelry and like holding your phone outside when you're walking into very crowded locations, especially when you're passing through the CBD. Personally, nothing ever happened to me, but I have a friend of mine who went there and they were filming some things, and then someone came and like was stealing his chain. I also had a few stories of people getting their phone stolen. So in the end of the day, even if I see it as quite safe and nothing ever happened to me, and like I feel very comfortable now walking around here because I know all the areas and I know where to go and where not to go to. This makes it a bit safer for me, but if you're coming here, especially for the first time, it's not a must for you to, let's say, cross the streets when you're holding your phone in your hands or wearing expensive jewelry like in certain areas. Then I think everything will be alright and you don't have to worry about stuff. But I think in the end of the day, just stay conscious about your environment, stay and keep observing things. And I'm saying this especially because when I arrived here first, people also told me that Nairobi used to be called Nairobi. I think there used to be a reason for it, maybe there's still a reason for it, but I don't see it personally, as I mentioned. And therefore you also have security everywhere, like in every shopping mall you go to, you have to like drop off your belongings and then they scan you just to make sure that you don't bring anything that's unsafe for other people into the mall. Even when you go to different apartment complexes to visit someone, you also oftentimes you have to provide your ID and they write down your personal details just to make sure that in case of anything they know who you are. And I think most of these things are more for prevention than for the actual case that stuff happens here all the time. Just be conscious and mindful, but in the end of the day, I think Nairobi is a quite safe city, especially compared to many other countries in the world. So then the second thing you shouldn't do is don't underestimate Nairobi's driving culture. And this especially if you drive in a country like Kenya for the very first time, then you should be very, very conscious about your environment, because first of all, it's left-handed driving. If you're not used to it, if you're not from the UK or any other African country or other countries that also have the same way of driving, that's the first thing that might confuse you. And also the matatus and other drivers here are quite reckless, because let's say for the matatus, these are the buses, the public transportation buses, and they act like they don't have any rules at all. They try to overtake you from left and right. They're sticking to the back of your car. Sometimes I even see them driving on the sidewalk, so they don't follow the rules. And the same goes for the boda bodas. These are the motorcycles that you will see all over Nairobi here, or like all over Kenya. And they also try to go through the traffic like there's no rules existing for them. So just be conscious of those things. And I think after a couple of days, after you got used to it, it will be alright for you. But just always observe your environment, always be conscious, and stay a bit more passive in the beginning. And there's another thing that counts to driving as well, is that the traffic lights here are just a suggestion. Even if they work and sometimes people are stopping at the traffic lights, it's not always the same case, because sometimes you see them just like passing the traffic lights and sometimes you don't. So you're wondering, or I was wondering at least, like when I'm allowed to drive and when not to. And at a certain point, I just started like observing what the other ones do, and most of the time they just pass the traffic lights as long as there's not a lot of traffic. And even then, if there's like a lot of traffic and like the streets are just congested, they are also just passing. This is something you can decide for yourself if you want to do it or not, but just something I learned while doing this every now and then as well, just following the other ones. There are like some askaris that are police officers. They like to pick me up because if they see me, they see that I'm not from here, and they automatically imagine that I have some more cash than other ones, and they just want to take advantage of me. And this is something you can just avoid by sticking to the rules for the beginning and not get too much attention onto yourself. Otherwise, you would just have all these unnecessary like long conversations with them, and it just gives you a lot of stress and it's just costing you a lot of time. The next thing I want to mention is don't neglect to learn the basic Swahili. So when I came here for the first time, I was here just for 2 weeks, and mainly with the purpose of doing some business here in Kenya. I didn't learn much Swahili. I just tried to pick it up from the locals here and there, but the problem there is sometimes the first things you know when you arrive here as a tourist, or the very first time you come here, the only words you will get taught, or you might know already, is like jambo, what means something like hello, and hakuna matata, what means something like no problem, everything is fine. And I think if you use these two words, they will automatically assume that you're a visitor, that you're not from here, and this makes it sometimes difficult for you. It's, for instance, in case of negotiations, if you want to buy something, you want to bargain, they will understand that you're not from here because you use the most touristy words you can use. So it just makes it simpler for you if you learn at least the basics. You can also use Duolingo for this, and this is how I learned my basic Swahili in the beginning, and afterwards I started to pick up from the locals while having conversations with them, because they're also quite helpful and friendly. So if you ask for some words, they will just translate it for you if they know the word, because also here in Nairobi everything is very much mixed, so they mix English and Swahili together. So you also don't have the necessary need to know the language. And there are two reasons why I think it's quite important to know at least the basics of the language. I think the first one is, as I mentioned before, for negotiations or like for just having basic conversations with people. When you travel outside of Nairobi and the further you go, the less people will speak English, and you will always meet some people on the streets or like wherever you are going to that are not living in the city, that are not very much fluent in English, and you have to speak at least some basic Swahili to converse with them. And the second reason is just to show some respect to the local culture. If you're traveling somewhere, or if I'm traveling somewhere, I always like to adjust a little bit and like learn some of the basic words, at least to converse a little bit. But in the end of the day, it's not 100% necessary for you, but it just makes things easier. You will get to know more of the culture, and people will respect you a bit more here as well, and they get excited when you speak some Swahili as a foreigner, let me tell you this. The next thing I want to mention is that you don't have to carry any cash with you here in Kenya. Kenya has this amazing mobile money system. It's called M-Pesa. It's basically like a bank account on your phone, and when you have this one, after going to a Safaricom shop, what is like the provider for this, you can get your SIM card from there, you can get M-Pesa from there, and afterwards you can just charge your M-Pesa mobile bank account that's connected with your phone number, then to your foreign bank account, and just transfer money from the foreign account to your mobile bank account, and then you can start making every single transaction you need from M-Pesa. It makes it safer for you, it makes it more convenient for you, and I would say this is the easiest payment method you can use. Instead of carrying stacks of cash with you, just to give you an example how useful M-Pesa here actually is, I have been, in the last 2 years since I've been living here, I only carried cash with me 2 times. And the next thing I want to mention is, don't spend all of your time in Nairobi. Especially if you have some more spare time and you're here for your travels. Even if Nairobi is beautiful, you should not spend all of your time here, because Kenya is such a big country with so many beautiful things you can do here. They have a lot of nature, they have a lot of history here. For instance, you have a park here in Naivasha where you can do safaris on a bicycle. So, but no worries, there are no lions, there are no predators at all. You would just see like giraffes, elephants. You can do so much outside of Nairobi, and you can just explore all the way to the north, where they also have different beautiful nature parks and beautiful smaller cities and towns. You have the tea farms here. You can go to the border of Ethiopia. You can go to Lamu. You can go to all these different kinds of places. You just need to do your research and see what things you actually like to do, and that you don't need to spend all the time you have here in Nairobi. Because even if it's beautiful, you have nice restaurants, you have still a lot of things to do here. But I think to actually understand the Kenyan culture better and to get to know the country much better, it's definitely needed and worth it to leave the main capital city here. And another thing I want to mention here is that Kenya has beautiful safaris, and this is the reason most of the people come. But I also wouldn't recommend only to come here to Kenya to just do safaris, because as I said, there's so much beauty in different things. You have so many beautiful hiking trails. And I think Mount Kenya here is the second biggest mountain in Africa after Kilimanjaro. It's also something very unique where you, if you have time, can climb up or like spend some time around these areas. So you have so much beauty and so much nature here, so much culture. You have basically everything you need within one country. Pick a car and just start exploring the country. These were the don'ts I wish I would have known before I came to Kenya for the very first time. I hope these don'ts help you to make your trip smoother, nicer, safer, and you can just enjoy as much as possible. I would love to know in the comments what your favorite location is, and maybe there's something else I didn't mention, what you shouldn't do, or what other ones shouldn't do, that can help the other ones that watch the video as well and read the comments. So drop it down below in the comments, and I see you in the next video.